Hi there, lifelong wellness students. This particular mini lecture is just going to cover Chapter 5, which is muscle fitness, and Chapter 6 in your textbook, which talks about flexibility. So we're going to first take a look at Unit 5 and looking just at resistance training and muscle fitness. So we're looking at strength versus endurance. So first of all, just real quick, looking at some of those benefits of resistance training. Now, this can either be body weight exercises, it could be dumbbell, barbell, you could do things on a stability ball, on a BOSU ball, with tubing. You know, there are so many things that we can do to enhance our muscle fitness today, and we should be doing things like that at least 2 to 3 days a week. So a big benefit is an increase in bone density. Therefore, it's going to reduce your risk of osteoporosis. We build bone until roughly about the age of 30. And then after that, if we don't continue to do exercises and have adequate intake of vitamin D and calcium, we will start to lose bone mass. And so we don't want that to happen because that's going to make our bones brittle, and our bone mineral content is going to decrease and therefore increase our risk for that disease, osteoporosis. So that's a huge benefit, is increasing our bone mass. Also, it's improving our ability to do ADLs. We call those activities of daily living. So think about what you do at home. What do you do that utilizes muscle strength or muscle endurance, or maybe a combination of both? You know, things like picking up a heavy box and putting it on a top shelf requires muscle strength. Maybe carrying a laundry basket that's full of dirty clothes down or up a flight of stairs to do laundry. Maybe it's raking the leaves in the fall or shoveling out your driveway in the winter. You know, it takes muscle strength to lift each shovelful of snow, but it also takes muscle endurance to be able to shovel out the entire driveway. So activities of daily living that we just take for granted. As we're younger, it's easier to perform, but as we age, it's definitely becoming harder to perform those ADLs. So doing resistance training exercise can help improve our ability to do those ADLs. Also, it helps with our low back health and posture. You know, back pain is very prevalent today for folks. 80% of the population will suffer back pain or an injury to their back. And the most common, you know, physical complaint today for people is backache. You know, so doing resistance training exercise and even things like Pilates and yoga to help strengthen the core, that would be your abdominals and lower back, that's going to help improve your back health and not only help with that posture as well. Also, it can increase our lean body mass, muscle mass, and so especially if we add extra weight and we are picking up heavy things and putting them down, I always say, that's going to increase our muscle mass, which in turn is going to increase our metabolism too. So just lots, we could go on and on. There's a ton of benefits of resistance training, but those are just a few that we've listed in your book. Next, taking a look at muscle strength versus muscle endurance, you can see the definition between the two. Strength is that ability of the muscles to exert maximal force against resistance. So the stronger those muscles are that surround those joints, they're going to be able to protect those joints and reduce your risk of getting injured. Endurance, on the other hand, is the ability of your muscles to exert repeated force over time. So when we look at a basic resistance training program, it's important to determine what are your goals. If you want to train for muscle strength, that means you have to follow the FIT principle as it's related to muscle strength. If you want to train for muscle endurance, you know, some people say, I just want to firm up and tone. I don't care about, you know, strength or getting bigger per se, gaining size and mass. If that's the case and you just want to firm and tone, then you would follow the FIT principle as it relates to muscle endurance. So here again, when we look at that, strength activities are really characterized by heavy weights and low numbers of repetitions. So there's a whole rhyme and a reason to this, you know, resistance training method. So if you want to get stronger, you have to lift anywhere from 70 to 95% of a 1 RM, and RM stands for repetition maximum. So a lot of times, you know, as a personal trainer, you know, with my client, we'll see what their 1 RM is, say on the bench press. How much weight can they lift through one full range of motion? And once we get that max number, we can calculate 70% of that and start off at around 70% of their max, and then we work our way up to 95% of their max. But remember, they're doing low numbers of repetitions, only 1 to 8 per set, because they're lifting a heavy weight. And then the rest period in between those sets is going to be quite long. So we can rest anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes in between our sets when we do strength-based exercise. For endurance, on the other hand, that's characterized by lighter weights but higher number of repetitions. So here you can see it's only 50 to 60% of a 1 RM. So that's a lot lighter. And look at the number of repetitions, 12 to 15. Sometimes we even go up to 20 or 25 reps. But note that the rest period in between the sets for muscle endurance is going to be anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. So it's less than a minute. It's rather quick. We turn around and we do another set that way. Some people want to gain size and mass. They want to hypertrophy is what we call it. So they're going to lift a moderately heavy weight, which is around 70% of a 1 RM, and do moderate number of repetitions like 8 to 12. They're going to rest anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. That's going to allow the release of those anabolic hormones like testosterone, insulin growth hormone, which is going to help to aid in the muscle mass improvement. So some things to think about when we begin a resistance training program. Two key principles are overload and progression. We can't continue to lift the same weights over time. So if you pick up 5-pound dumbbells and you start doing arm curls with those, maybe in the beginning you're going to start to feel and maybe see a little bit of change. But after time, your muscles and your body gets used to what you're doing. So you have to shock the system. You have to apply overload. So maybe it's going from 5 pounds up to 8-pound dumbbells now. And then from there, we're going up to 10-pound dumbbells. Or you can manipulate the number of reps you're doing. So instead of doing 15 reps, now I'm going to go only down to 12 reps at that heavier weight, and vice versa. So we can manipulate those variables to apply overload and then to progress in our program. So again, you can see that FIT principle as it's relating to strength and endurance. They are different. The only things that are the same are frequency, 2 to 3 days a week. And it doesn't have to be limited to that. You could lift weights or do muscle strength and endurance activities 5 days a week if you wanted to. But the main thing to remember is to not train the same muscle group 2 days in a row. So if today you trained legs and you did all lower body leg exercises, maybe tomorrow you go ahead and do some upper body stuff. And then maybe the next day you can come back and do legs, right? So we can alternate upper and lower body, for example, and still train 3, 4, 5 days in a row if we really wanted to. As you overload those muscles, though, you can see that they will start to hypertrophy, especially if you're following that moderately heavy, FIT principle for mass, right? About 70% of a 1 RM, and you're doing 8 to 12 reps. So that's, if you do apply that method, you'll start to see that hypertrophy and that growth. Also, there's just a few other weight training concepts that we like to talk about, and the main ones I wanted to share with you are just that hypertrophy and atrophy. Hypertrophy is that increase in muscle size, and then atrophy is a decrease, and over time that happens to folks. If you break your leg and you have your leg in a cast, when you get that cast off, what's that quadricep or your thigh look like in comparison to the other thigh that didn't have a cast? It looks atrophied, right? The muscle cells, they're still there, they just shrink, they get smaller, but they have a great memory. So once you go back and you start doing your squats, your lunges, things like that, muscle cells will start to hypertrophy again and catch up with that other side. Also, when we look at different types of contractions, we have isometric, isotonic, and concentric, and eccentric. So the main ones that I really like to focus on is, say you're doing an arm curl. Okay, the concentric contraction is the shortening. So when you lift the dumbbell up towards your shoulder when you're doing that arm curl, that's considered the concentric phase. So when you do concentric phases of all of your resistance training exercises, you always want to exhale. So I always think of it as exhale upon exertion. Breathing is very important with resistance training. You want to make sure that you always exhale on that exertion. Okay, never hold your breath when you do resistance training exercises. So for example, if you're doing a push-up, when you push up, you exhale. When you lower down, you inhale. Okay, so that eccentric contraction would be, going back to that arm curl, when we lower the weight back down, that's the eccentric phase. On the push-up, when we lower ourselves back down to the ground, that would be considered the eccentric phase. So we always exhale during the eccentric phase of the lifting. So breathing is very, very important with resistance training. Also, I just wanted to touch on a couple other things here. Major muscle groups. There are over 500 muscles and over 200 bones in our body, but we want you to understand just maybe 10 or so major muscle groups and have a knowledge of where they're located, what they're called, and exercises you can do to strengthen those muscle groups. So the main ones that we'd like you to know are the deltoid, which is your shoulder here, the pectoral, which is your chest, the bicep, which is the front of your upper arm, the quadricep muscle, which is the front of your thigh. Notice the quadricep is comprised of 4 different muscles. As a whole, those 4 muscles make up what we call the quadricep. On the posterior view of the body, we have the trapezius, which is this big triangular shape here. And you can see on the right side of the body, these are all superficial muscles on top. But if we tore these muscles away, you will also have muscles deep to that as well. Okay, we're not going to get into those deep muscles, but the superficial ones you definitely should know, like the trapezius, which is this big kind of triangular shaped muscle. Again, that's part of your deltoid or your shoulder. Your tricep, which is the back of your upper arm. Your latissimus dorsi, which is this whole big muscle right here. That's a big chunk of your back, okay? Your gluteals, you got your gluteus maximus, gluteus minimus, gluteus medius, and then hamstrings, which are the back of your thigh. You have 3 muscles that comprise your hamstrings. Semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and bicep femoris all comprise those hamstring muscles. And then lastly, your gastrocnemius, which is your calf. Okay, gastrocnemius. So what I'd like you to be able to do is identify exercises you can do to strengthen those muscle groups. And if you look further in your textbook, and I'm going to scroll kind of quickly here all the way to the back of our book, and you will see, I'm almost there, give me a second here, you will see that there is a few pages on different weight training exercises. Oh, here we go. Starting on page, right there, starting on page 181. Now all of these machines we have in the Delta College Fitness Center, so if it ever does open back up, we'll be able to get in there and start using that equipment again. But all of these exercises, you can see the name of the exercise, what it's called, and what muscle group that it is actually going to target. So you've got a lot of machine-based exercises pictured, so that's a great resource to identify what are things I can do to target my bicep, what can I do to target my tricep, type of thing. Then also, in addition to the machine exercises, I wanted to show you that we also have dumbbell exercises pictured for those of you that have dumbbells at home and you want to do some exercises using just handheld dumbbells. So we've listed and shown pictures of quite a few dumbbell-based exercises that can target a lot of those major muscle groups that we just talked about. And then also we have pictured some flexibility exercises too. In addition to flexibility, that's another health-related component of fitness that we will be talking about as well. Tubing. People like to use those handheld, they got the handles on the end and the tubes. It's a kind of an elastic tube that provides resistance. That's a great way to do, exercises to enhance muscle endurance per se. So there's a bunch of tubing exercises pictured. We've got some stability ball exercises pictured, some partner exercises, and then lastly some Bosu ball exercises. So lots of resources in our Lifelong Wellness textbook that can help you identify, what are some things that I can do to enhance, muscle strength, muscle endurance, and try to target each of those major muscle groups that we just pointed out. So I also am going to include this other handout in our weekly module as well that talks about resistance training tips, the differences between repetitions and sets, and then some more exercises that are just body weight to even target some of those major muscle groups. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing that with you as well. And then also how to increase. So when we talk about overload, making something a little bit harder, So for example, many people can't do a push-up and they just give up. They say, oh, I can't do push-ups. Well, instead, let's start with a modified version. Do them on the wall. So stand up, do a push-up on the wall. Then move from there, once you're getting stronger, to the floor and do them on your knees. And then from there, once you get even stronger, you can do a regular advanced push-up. So this is just a nice article that kind of talks about muscle strength, muscle endurance, flexibility, and it supplements some of that information that we have in our textbook. Now I want to move on real quick and just talk a little bit about flexibility. If I can get there, so bear with me. Flexibility is actually the ability of your muscles, or your joints, I'm sorry, to move freely through a full range of motion. So poor flexibility can lead to stiffness, it can lead to misalignment at our joints, which can definitely lead to a lot of pain. So doing some static stretching or exercises that move through a full range of motion is going to be a great way to enhance our flexibility. And by doing that, you can see there are a ton of benefits of that, because as we age, as we get older, just like everything else, flexibility decreases with age. We start to experience more back pain, hip pain, joint pain, and a lot of that can be due to improper flexibility. So there are roughly 4 different ways that we can improve our flexibility, and the main one that I wanted to show you is the static stretching and the dynamic stretching. These are 2 that we can do at home on our own to improve our flexibility. Static stretching is basically taking a stretch and holding it for a period of time. So say you sit on the floor with your legs straight out in front of you and you reach for your toes and you hold that for 10 to 60 seconds. Okay, that's all it is, static stretching. So a great time to do your static stretching is at the end of your workout, okay, when your tissues and your joints are good and warm. Sit down and do static stretches for every single joint, okay, to work on enhancing the flexibility and the range of motion at that joint. Dynamic stretching, on the other hand, is where movement is involved. You're moving through a full range of motion at a slower pace. So for example, if I were to circle my arms, do big arm circles, that's going to warm up my shoulder joint, okay? So dynamic stretching is movement being involved, where static stretching, no movement is involved. Dynamic flexibility exercises are great to do as part of your warm-up, okay? And if you actually look in our course site, I'm going to show you, there are, under the content button, I did put a nice range of motion flexibility program for you. I'm going to show this to you just a second here. It is under the content button. You will see under exercise resources, okay? If you look under exercise resources, you'll see a mobility workout. And this is a great mobility workout. Some of the exercises might be difficult for certain people, but this is a great way to work on your mobility and your flexibility, okay? So check that out, all right? Check that one out. So now I'm going to go back and look at ballistic stretching. Ballistic stretching is bouncy, jerky movements. So if you were to again sit on the floor with your legs straight out in front of you and you were bouncing as you reach for your toes, ballistic stretching is not recommended because that can increase the chances of injury. So unless you are a really super flexible person, you don't want to bounce or jerk, you know, when you do any type of stretching. Always, if you're doing dynamic, keep it a slow, controlled range of motion, fluid through that full range of motion. Don't be bouncy or jerky about it. And then PNF stretching stands for proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. This is just where we contract a muscle prior to stretching it. PNF stretching is great when you have a partner, okay? Or a lot of times you'll see it done in physical therapy or in rehab type settings, or even sports trainers or athletic trainers will do it with their players. So PNF is great, the contract relax method is great, but we don't always have a partner available to do that type of stretching. So just a few things to point out as far as flexibility. Remember, 3 to 5 days a week is what's recommended to improve your flexibility. Intensity, we want to stretch to the point of mild discomfort. It shouldn't be painful. So if you're doing that static stretch and it starts to hurt, that's your body's way of saying, hey, ease up, you're overdoing it. Time, hold each stretch for 10 to 60 seconds and try to do static stretches at the end of your workout. Okay, so pay attention to the stretching safely guidelines that we've also listed there in your textbook. And again, take a look at that other article that I am providing as well. And this can be very helpful to give you ideas of flexibility exercises in addition to what I have given you in your textbook as well.